All right, we're now live. So tonight we have another guest speaker from Cincinnati, Ohio. His name is Henry VANSTYN. He's going to show us his application web framework that he's been working on for a long time called RapidApp. And the first time I saw Henry's demo of RapidApp was at YAPC in Austin, I believe, where he gave a quick lightning talk on the application. And as soon as I saw it, I knew this was just something amazing that I've been watching for someone to come up with this for a long time. It just was something that I tried to do myself in the past and didn't pull it off nearly as well as he did. And then it was really cool because it was a lightning talk, so we didn't get a lot of time to demo it during that time. But a few talks later, Ribasushi came up and gave another quick disclaimer that, hey, just so you guys know, what Henry just showed is pretty darn amazing. And so I was really glad he did that because I was blown away, and I'm hoping other people pick that up as well. I don't know, do you remember that, Henry?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's really cool that you got a shout out from him. So what I'm going to do is turn over to Henry. He's going to give us a sweet demo of the RapidApp, and we look forward to trying out the demos that you show us tonight and giving it a whirl for ourselves. So here we go.
Well, thanks, Steve, for that introduction, and thanks for having me. Looking forward to demoing some of this stuff for you guys. So, RapidApp. What is it? Well, you could say it's a framework. It extends Catalyst. It's based on Catalyst, so the same rules of Catalyst apply to it. And it also adds additional DSLs and environments and APIs for developing new applications. But you could also say that it's a toolkit for when you have other existing applications and you just want to have pluggable components, or you want to call up a specific feature to embed within some other type of application that isn't even necessarily Catalyst, because it provides PSGI plaque interfaces and mechanisms for pluggable components. And still even further, to the end of the spectrum, you could say it's a utility. A utility meaning a program that you're going to run where you wouldn't even necessarily be a programmer. You just want to have some utility application, and I'll show some of those. There are some scripts that ship with RapidApp to access some of the functionality that it does, and you don't even need to be a programmer to use it. So, but those definitions, and this is typically how things are defined, is in terms of how it's used. Is it a framework? Am I going to build a new application, a toolkit, what have you? But rather than how it's used, the more useful way to answer the question is what it does. And the main thing that it does is interfaces. Model-driven interfaces, meaning we want to have interfaces that are based on some core model in the back end, and that may be maybe a database, and it typically is, but it doesn't have to be. That's not the only kind of model. We want to access some core inner model and then be able to have automatically generated interfaces, and that's the main thing that RapidApp does. And these interfaces are robust and fully encapsulated. Well, like what? Like grids, for instance. This is a view of a grid that represents a table, which is a standard sort of scenario. And these are robust and interactive. We can sort, we can rearrange, we can add filters. Show me everything where tracks are greater than 100, for instance, and it'll filter based on that. And we can have multiple. It's a full interactive query builder. And name, say, doesn't contain, and there we have. And there's also editing, which we can do and just type directly in line, and it saves and persists immediately to the server. So this is, this is one example of grids, and again, this talks to a database, which is a standard sort of a paradigm, and these are fully extendable. But there's more than that. We also have trees, and you know, there's no database necessarily involved, and so you know, you have trees where you can expand and collapse, common sort of things, type to find, and then also trees that may actually be tied to a database like this one is, that are rich and interactive, like I can drag and drop and rearrange structures on the fly and have that persist immediately, and so on. Other examples, property grid, which like the earlier example, which is a grid that represents a table, here is something that represents an individual, an individual row. And another thing then to point out, when I say that this is model driven, it's based on the model, and we'll see this later, the effort to get to these interfaces is most of it is entirely automatic, and it's based on the schema that is read from the database. In the case of database-driven apps like this, and again, DBIx or DBIx class is one of the main applications in our stack that we do representations for. And so one of the really powerful things about DBIc is its concept of relationships. And in a database, if you have relationships that have foreign key constraints defined, then DBIx class is able to introspect those relationships to represent them. So for instance, here we have, in this example database, it's a track row, and it has a genre. And if I click to change that, I automatically have a drop down where I can actually change that value, and it's able to be a drop down, and it's able to have these items in the list all automatically based on the understanding of the schema, because this, in this case, the genre, there's a foreign key constraint which points to that. So if I want to change the genre, obviously I need to select from that related source. So this is sort of the way, this is the rapid part in RapidApp, is it gives you these out-of-the-box base states that are useful based on the real fundamental properties of your model. And then you can, of course, customize on top of that, but a good starting point is useful. And then also other relationships. So this is also a drop-down. And then album, you see this is actually configured to open a grid to select the related row, which is the same. It's the same concept that's happening with the drop-down. It's just another way to do the selection, and it's also, you know, searchable as well. So I can change that value like that. And to get to these choices, these are very high-level options. It's just a simple toggle. You can say, I want this relationship to be represented in that manner or another manner. We also have container structures with navigation, and RapidApp, its interfaces understand where they live and the context in which they live. So, like you'll see, like on the previous slide, you'll see that there's no links next to the ends of each of the values. If we come back to this, the next one, we'll see that there's these little magnify links have appeared next to the relationships. And that's because if we click those, we can actually follow that relationship and then continue to follow on through and navigate around. And it's able to do this because it knows that it's rendered in a container navigation structure, which is in this case a tabbed interface. And this is a concept that it's aware of automatically. These are the base states that it gives you. And you know, of course, multi-panel layouts, but things can be assembled in multiple different manners, but there's certain patterns that are common and useful. And the standard left side navigation with right side content panel is a common paradigm. And we can, like for instance, in this particular app, we can do a search in the tree, and there's all the files in the in this directory that contain the string date. And this this example right here that we're showing here is actually RapidApp EFS, which is a RapidApp-based application. It is an example of an application that is that you can write in RapidApp. And there happens to be no database functionality in this particular app, which I sort of wrote just to show that it's, databases are really important, but it's not the only thing that RapidApp does. It has all sorts of capabilities, and it's taken, you're right, Steve, it's taken quite a while to coalesce and assemble all of these concepts into this cohesive structure that it's up to now. So that's a taste of.
I think that's really exciting. I love that point that it's not just for databases, and I love that you came out with RapidApp EFS to show that, because I think a lot of people, when they first see the demo, they think it's, well, okay, it's a database interface.
Right. Exactly. It's because it's more than that. It's a whole model. I mentioned earlier that these interfaces are fully encapsulated. Now, what I mean by that is, and we're going to get to an example of how to get to these interfaces here in a minute, but they're configured on the server, but automatically generated for the client. All of the examples that I just showed, not a single line of JavaScript was written to do any of the stuff that we've seen so far. And this is handled all automatically by RapidApp. Again, it understands where it lives in terms of for navigation. It understands where it lives in terms of the backend controller, and then puts that information in the client-side interface that's generated, so that it's able to find its way back to the server to handle this communication. The Ajax request logic, server-side persistence, and whatnot is all baked in. So, for instance, if we come back and we look at the tree that we looked at earlier, and you'll see it has the same state that I played with when we saw it a minute ago. If we were to open Firebug and actually look at what happens when we interact with this, and say I drag something around, you'll see that it's actually generating these requests automatically to the server. And again, this is all free. It happens automatically, and it knows where to go. It knows where to go based on where this particular module lives, and it handles all those details for you. So that's great. How do you get these interfaces now? All right, hopefully you're all convinced and you want these kind of interfaces for your application. How do we get them? As a framework, a toolkit, a utility? Yes, all of these approaches are available to get to this functionality, depending on what you're wanting to do, and not all needs are the same. Sometimes you're developing a new application. Sometimes you just want casual access to to a database for an admin function. So these features are bundled and exposed broadly to provide multiple entry points for multiple uses, which is comes down to the very, very deep stack that RapidApp represents, is that there's basically these deep core capabilities that allows building up these higher layers up upon each other. So these higher capabilities are in fact built up from the lower level concepts for quick jump off points. So let's start looking at some actual real examples. Let's start all the way at the highest end of abstraction, which is as a utility, which again, this doesn't necessarily have to be a, you don't even have to be a programmer to use this. So one of the things that's shipped with the RapidApp distribution is the script rdbic.pl, which is shipped in core. So once you install RapidApp, just doing that, which just install it like that, and if you never, I will warn you, if you've never installed RapidApp before, it does have a lot of dependencies. DBIx class, Catalyst, all of those things have dependencies. But once you install it, you will have available a script, rdbic.pl, and this is a very simple script. And is what it lets you do is it lets you specify a single DBI connect string which is, I don't know, for those of you familiar with database access in Perl, you know that DBI is the standard tool for that. And you know, just about everything that talks to a database uses DBI. In that moment, when you connect to the database, you have this simple string format. So you say DBI : driver name, and there's lots of different drivers that are available. But let's say MySQL, for instance. And then I set up a database named an example database, classic models, and this is just a sample database that's running on this box, but it can be any database, any connect string, Postgres, MS SQL, SQLite, whatever it is. You just type it in, and then the username and password, comma separated. And I am just using the root account for this database server, which is just local and no password. So when you run this command, what it does is it, under the hood, it actually constructs all of the things necessary to bring an entire application to be running and launches it on the fly. By default, it puts it on port 3500. So let's look at what is running on port 3500 now. And you'll see just with that one command, we now have a fully running application. And the structure that is set up for our DBIC is the standard double pane layout, where we have a menu point for each table in the database, and then you can click these things and open those tables to view in the panel on the right side. One other thing I'd like to point out here, now that we're actually in a full-blown application that's full screen, is the navigation schemes. There's a fully fleshed out navigation capabilities that you can take advantage of when you run things in a full screen like this. And if you notice, if you look at the address bar, as I click around, you'll see it change. And it's a single page app, so it's actually changing the hash target, but it is still a fully RESTful, fully valid path. So I can actually, if I were to link to that, right, and open in a new window, I can actually jump. You can actually jump straight to that as if it was any kind of target. So it's fully RESTful while being a fully RESTful and URL navigation while being a single page app. So it's sort of both benefits. So anyway, you can see here this particular sample database has these different rows, and we can see, if we look in here, that some of them have already relationships are defined. So there's product line, and you see this is a relationship. And obviously I didn't configure anything. You saw what I did to get to this. I didn't do any configuration. The way that it's able to know this is based on the foreign key constraint, which was defined in this database. So how good the interface is able to be off the bat is based on how good the schema is. The better the schema is, the better of a model it is that truly represents the the data it's trying to express, the better things will look in the interface. And we can follow these things around in descriptions. Another thing about a DBIx class, there we go. Let's have a fewer columns so that it's cleaner. So in DBIx class, there's this concept of relationships, which are based on foreign key constraints. And a single foreign key constraint, which means this column represents the key in this other foreign table, is able to actually define two relationships are implied by a single foreign key. Well, there's the foreign key itself, which is often referred to as a belongs to. So in this case, we're in this product table. Each product row belongs to a product line. So each of these we see belong to the product line classic cars. However, the other side, from the perspective of the referenced table, going back the other way, that's considered a has many. In other words, there are and order details is a has many, and the reason this exists and is here is because the order detail table, it has a foreign key constraint which references and points back to the product. So it points back to product code, which is the product row, is a foreign key, and so because of that, it's the reverse operation. So the way that and this is purely virtual, but we represent it as a column. So we are able to show here that, well, there are 28, this particular row, the 1962 Lancia Delta 16V has 16, or rather has 28 orders that then point to it. And we represent these multi-relationships as a count with a link to then open it, so we can then go and see those exact 28 options. And also everything, each page, and this is fully paginated, and we can change the number of rows per page. Each page view pull, it is a request to the back end. And this is also part of the power that DBIx class brings, is that we are constructing a query that we're firing off on the server for each page view that we pull. This allows us to, if we sort, it's sorting the entire set. We're not just sorting this page, we're sorting the whole set of 110, but viewing the top of the 1 through 15 of that 110 set, but it's going back to the server. And the way that we represent some of these more complex column concepts, such as the multi-relationships, even though it's virtual, it's actually a sub-select that's being generated, so it's still being executed on the database. So we can even sort by this virtual column, because again, this is part of the deep, powerful stack that DBIx class brings, is you can sort by a sub-select. And it also, another thing that makes now good timing for application functionality like RapidApp that's able to do these things, is because databases have gotten a lot more powerful. And so now, you can take advantage of, 10 years ago, you wouldn't be able to trust a database to be doing as many of these things, and you'd have to do it, in code. But the problem is when it's in code, reconciling all of these issues, such as paging, page size, specific slices of information and referent information, it gets very, very difficult to do all those things manually. And now that we have a database, we have powerful relational databases, it's about time we start taking advantage of them. Making use of them. So, are there any questions so far?
Yeah, I got a quick question. How does it know to use the classic cars or vintage cars as the title for the product line foreign key?
So good question. Good question. In this particular case, this is the key, right? It is the key. Otherwise, however, and that is still good. And we did not set this up ahead of time. I did not ask you to ask this question, but that is an example of a kind of challenge that you can't introspect from the database. So like the schema gives you this base set of capabilities, but there's extra things beyond that you don't know from that. And one of those things is, in the case of foreign keys, what column should you show to pick that? And so that is why, and then we'll go into this later, is that then there's this extra metadata that we can set that tells us how to do that. And that's a value that can be associated with the source called display name or display column. And display column identifies which column do we want to show those content, both for the content of showing up in the relationship, showing up for like breakdown. And I just started getting a lot of feedback.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, when I go off of mute, it gets all kind of weird. So I'll go back on mute. But we got another question here too.
Yeah, you talked about the so sorting within the select or the sub-select.
Yep.
Is it possible to save that sub-select too?
What do you mean save it?
So let's say you put a filter on and you reduced your number of rows to 10. Can you save that filter then?
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. Let's just based on that, let's go ahead and move on. I was going to pull up a couple other database examples, but I think you guys get the idea. You can run. You can again use rdbic.pl and then throw a database connection at it and play with it. But yes, you're correct that there's limited, there's only so much we can do with absolutely zero configuration, right? So once you go higher and higher in the stack, you get easier, faster access to capabilities, but then you have less access to different choices and customizations. So that's when let's step back and go a little bit higher in the stack, and let's talk about how we could use RapidApp as a toolkit. One way that it can be used as a toolkit is what we've already seen as embeddable components. We'll show you how that we get into that. And you can also use RapidApp for drop-in admin sections. There are Catalyst plugins where you can get very, very quickly, to add on some features and capabilities. And then also Plaque PSGI application interfaces. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Plaque and PSGI, even if you use something like Catalyst, even if you don't know what Plaque is, you actually are using Plaque. And Plaque is the standard way that is available for all kinds of different web frameworks to be dispatched, deployed, and integrated with each other. And it's really, really powerful, and it provides a mechanism to glue together different features and functionality across different web apps. And also, to answer your question, give me a minute here, and I'm coming back around to answer that question. But we're going to take this little detour here first, but then in a couple slides, we'll get back to the saved searches. So just bear with me.
Sounds good.
So one example, the RDBIC script we just looked at, it's actually just a simple wrapper around this Plaque application class, just as one example. Another example, this slideshow is a PSGI app. In fact, here it is. So this is just using this slideshow is just a simple HTML JavaScript slideshow I downloaded online, and then I'm mounting it to run as a web server here to then display. And this right here is what a Plaque configuration looks like. And this isn't actually, none of this has to do with RapidApp. This is just a ordinary Plaque application using vanilla capabilities. But this nice little window that's displaying this code view, it is being rendered by RapidApp, actually RapidEFS. Now, how am I doing that? How does that work? Well, here's the markup from the previous slide. And all I've been doing here to show the examples are iframes. Very, very simple. But part of what is allows this to happen, you'll notice here that the target of this iframe is a relative path to this path FS, which is relative to where we are. And this is sort of the next point, is that RapidApp, it understands its context when it's mounted within a structure. It is able to know where it is to properly render and do the right thing. So, for instance, here's the actual real structure of this slideshow is in fact a PSGI application, and this is the top level file, and you see that we're mounting slides. So you see we're running at /slides up here. Oops. and it's and we see that's mounted right here, which is what gets to, that's what we just saw, right? And then we're also mounting some other things, like we're mounting FS is being mounted, and we're loading it in. And oh, by the way, this convention of load PSGI, all that Plaque does is it returns a code ref. And we could have just embedded this directly in line. It's just for a cleaner look. So like FS, but PSGI, let's look at that. Here it is. This is again using RapidApp EFS, and in this case, Plaque, it has this very, very simple convention where you expose just a simple object constructor, and then you return this toApp method, which just returns this code ref. And that's how Plaque works, and you can mount things at these code refs. But what's special then about this, and you could run this individual file right here, you could run this independently. It could be mounted, it could be mounted the way it is here, mounted under FS, and it could run, or it could be run directly, or it could be mounted under any other structure, and it wouldn't matter. And this file would be the same regardless of where it's mounted. And so if we look back at our app, and so we go to FS, for instance, here we are, now we're in this application and it's running at FS. And this is, if we look at, if we look at the page source, you can see all these things that it's generating. It has to know where it is to properly generate these links that is its relative path. And that's a challenge to have that stuff all work. And that's another thing that RapidApp does and is able to do for deployment, is you're able to, it's able to live automatically at other locations and just do the right thing automatically. And that's how you can just drop in little snippets of functionality like this in all sorts of structures. So now, but then to come back to the question, well, what about saved searches? And well, what about the display column? And what about all kinds of other ways to use it? We step back a bit further and look at, excuse me, just drinking a gulp of water, looking at it as a framework, which is, in other words, for developing new apps or extending development. Now, this obviously is a deep topic, much, much deeper, and we can only go over so much stuff in the scope of this talk, but there's a few things that we can dive into and look at some examples for how that process would start. So, like I said, RapidApp extends Catalyst, so you can develop using the same rules that you would if you develop under Catalyst. You can bootstrap a new application using catalyst.pl, or you can use rapidapp.pl, which is just sugar that does basically the same thing as catalyst.pl, but it'll automatically configure and set things up specific to RapidApp. But you could do the same thing with Catalyst and manually do those things. And then to use it at the higher levels, and then this is almost sort of the threshold of toolkit or framework. You could say this is sort of in between. Is that there's these plugins, and the way that a Catalyst application becomes a RapidApp application is simply by loading one or more of the RapidApp plugins, and then generating configurations. So let's look at an example of that. There's this Catalyst application called Bluebox. And let's jump over to it on GitHub. And this was a little application that I did last year at an Angel Hack hackathon event. And this whole application was written in a day. And that was the nature of the competition. And I teamed up with some other developers who I'd never met before, and they did the JavaScript and HTML, and I did all the I did the back end database and whatnot. So let's look at the main application class. And for those of you familiar with Catalyst, this will look very, very similar. You'll already be familiar with this. For those who aren't familiar with Catalyst, the way that Catalyst works is you define a class that is the application. And then Catalyst provides this mechanism for loading plugins. And it's done very simply in a use statement. You say use Catalyst, and then the argument list is a list of plugins, and it's actually relative to Catalyst : plugin : So in this context, saying RapidApp means load the plugin Catalyst : plugin : RapidApp. And so there's these other higher level plugins that are provided that allow you to, even for the scope of designing a new application, to jump straight to these high level capabilities and concepts. Like one of them is Tab GUI, and is what, when you load Tab GUI, that says I want an application that has a tree and a content panel with the RESTful URL navigation. Right? You could put that together yourself, and I obviously don't have time in this talk to get into the details of RapidApp modules, but you could, the RapidApp stack goes deep, and you can create your own RapidApp modules, and you can assemble all these things yourself, or these plugins allow you to get to that thing very quickly. And then DBIx is the plugin that says I want to automatically configure for a DBIc model, and I want to have these options in the tree for each table, like we saw, which is basically DBIc jumps to the paradigm that RDBIc does. Really, all RDBIc.pl does is it assembles this thing. And then there's other higher level plugins that we're running here. Like one of them is AuthCore, which will, if you enable this, it'll automatically configure and set up authentication in a user database for you. And another one is NavCore. And what NavCore does is it enables functionality like saved views, which I'll show you now here in a second. And then Core Schema Admin, this one right here allows me to edit the database that is used for the authentication and navigation plugins. There's this common core schema that RapidApp has that it uses for this common location for persisting out-of-the-box functionality. And again, one thing to point out and to be clear about is that none of these things are mandatory. Nothing is mandatory. Nothing is necessary. You can use the plugins like AuthCore to automatically have a user database for you out of the box, but it doesn't mean that that's the only way that you can have that. You can set up your own authentication and authorization in the same way that you can do that in Catalyst. So it's just, everything is optional, nothing is required. So then once we load this set of plugins, we do some configuration options. And then there's little different simple configuration options that are then based on both the plugins that are loaded and RapidApp in general. And one of the main high-level points is there's this module root namespace option, which if you don't set this, it assumes that RapidApp is going to take over at the root at slash. And so you can't, if you're writing an application and you don't want any other controllers and you want it to just be pure RapidApp, then great, that's what it'll do. But if you want to have other controllers in your application and you want to segment the automatic functionality that RapidApp generates someplace else, you simply do it with this option, and this says it's going to live at /ADM. And then there's some other simple high-level options that like apply to Tab GUI. We can say, what do we want titles to be? What do we want initial widths to be? And then there's other, RapidApp also has some built-in capabilities like template controller access, which, we don't have really time to get too deep into that here, but you can look at, let's just look at what these options do. Here's this whole application. This is one class that has these configs, loads these plugins, and then there is a model that's set up, which is a DBIx class schema model. And again, this is totally vanilla, the same way that you do a model. And if you've ever designed a Catalyst application with DBIx class, you're familiar with this. And the one extra bit that you can then do is if you add a config key to that model config called RapidDBIc, it'll automatically be read in to change things based on if the RapidDBIc plugin is loaded. It'll automatically read this information in and use it to configure options. And like one of the base things is like the display column, which is which column do we want to use to display. That can be set, and there's a whole bunch of other options that can be set, and I'll show the next example with more options. But let's look. So we've seen the code for this application. Let's just go ahead and look at it. And again, we actually mounted this application within our same PSGI app. So it's just right here. And you'll see here, this was like a little idea for this angel hack thing. The idea was you ship boxes to them, and then it's stored, and then you can retrieve them later. And that was sort of the idea. And so we wrote this little application to demo that concept. So, and in this case, again, we didn't want, this is there's this regular public side content here, which is just regular HTML and JavaScript. And so in this case, we didn't want to take over, the whole application for RapidApp. That's why we had that module root namespace set. But we can go ahead and we can log in, and all of this functionality is enabled by the authcore plugin. It automatically gives you this paradigm for authentication and protects your space with authentication. And you can log in. And in this case, we're just we're still on the public side, and then we have, we've now that we've logged in, we exposed some extra pages that will be shown, and we have different options that we can do on those pages. And again, this is all plain Catalyst. But now we also have site administration. We're using this section of our RapidApp generated interface, and so then this allows us to actually do some CMS capability. We can, there's some cool CMS functionality that RapidApp has. You can, we can embed images automatically and cool stuff like that, and it just works. But then we also have, because we loaded the Rapid DBIc plugin. Here's the underlying database that was used to represent those the application flow, and yeah, so here was the question that was asked. I'm finally now getting around to answering that question. Is how do I save that? So I want to sort this way, and I want this size for that column, and maybe I don't want to show that column, and maybe I want to change the header of this to something, and maybe I want to have a filter that says that I have more than one box for the relationship, right? So I have all those things. Now I want to save it. Well, once you enable NavCore, not only do you automatically have access to these navigation paradigms, but you also automatically have the ability to save searches. So I can now save this. I can choose a name for it, and I save it, and it's now saved. So I can come back to it, and I can get back to that state at any time. And then not only that, but when you use NavCore and AuthCore together, they detect the presence of each other, and then allow you to do things like you can author your own search, and then this will just show up for me. So I'm logged in as admin, and it's showing up for me under my views. But I can then I can drag this to the public side, and then it'll reload when I close this. And now I've just authored this view for everybody who logs in. And this is, again, you can control, you can get right down to the nitty-gritty of controlling permissions for how that works. We were loading the core schema admin plugin, if you remember, and what that does is it adds access to the core schema database to be available in your view, and it uses the same Rapid DBIc functionality so that you can go in and you can manage your user database. So here's our users, and you can add a new user, and give him a name, and I can set a password for him, and standard paradigms and conventions, and I can assign roles, and this ties directly into the paradigms, the same paradigms for Catalyst. In terms of Catalyst roles, these things automatically configure these, so then when you're writing controller code and custom code, you can use the exact same DSL you're used to in Catalyst to say check user roles, for instance. You can say check user roles administrator. Let's take away, let's not make him an administrator. And I log out, and I'll log in as Foo, who I just created. I think we can log in as him, and oh right, and we don't actually give him permission to. We don't even show the admin section by default, but we can actually get in there because we still have it enabled. But because he's not an administrator, he doesn't have access to core schema admin. And you'll see here now we can get to that view that we saved before. So this is a way, and we do this for applications all the time, where we throw together an application very easily, and then we're able to give our users, our admin users, they have the access to build these views themselves and author them themselves, which is a very, very powerful combination. So we looked at Blue Box. Another example is Chinook, which is, and this is, by the way, if you go to rapidapp.info, there's a whole very, very in-depth demo of using Chinook, which is a sample database. And this is, we can look in this database, and there's other capabilities like we notice here. So like, you asked, how does it know which thing to display here, right? And how does it know, for instance, that bytes, that this is bytes in terms of megabytes, and that price in terms of money, because that's not typically something that the schema knows about, right? So to enable that capability, if we look at the code for Chinook, for instance, and we look at its class, and oh, and by the way, the rapid DBIc config that we saw that was in the model, you can put it in the model, or you can put it underneath the plugin key in the main app. It's just your preference where to do that. But it's the same concepts that are there. And so you'll see here we're defining things like the display column, right? So for like genre, the way that the only thing that we had to do to make it show up as name and then make it be a drop down was just these two settings right there. And that means that any relationships to this are going to use the name column and going to use a combo instead of like a grid, like I showed you a grid earlier when selecting in the example, is an alternative. That was all we had to do to make that happen. But then also, if we look down further, we can see, for instance, we have some options here. We have properties, extra metadata that is associated with column properties, for instance. So, for instance, we can set a renderer is one of the options that we can do, and we're setting the renderer to say that it's file size. Or we can set a renderer to be US money, right? And so that's how, that's why that shows up as money and bytes, right? And this is just scratching the surface. Again, if you look at the Chinook demo on rapidapp.info, it will get way deep into more topics that I haven't had time to get to here. Like there's all sorts of capabilities that are baked in, like cool stuff like summary functions that you can put on. So like you can total, what's the total of that column for this view, which goes back. There's joined columns that this actually, I think we have some. Yeah, we have, in this case, this is configured with joined columns, which are showed up, and you can have joins that go out multiple levels using this. We want to look at Blue Box or Chinook. There it is. Like you specify joins with this include call specification. Again, not time to get into all these things, but there's all sorts of capabilities that are exposed at a really high level, a really high conceptual level, to where you can get access to all kinds of things and set defaults before ever having to even get to the point of then customizing and writing code. And you can still customize and write code, and that's a much deeper topic. You can go in and you can edit the class values all you want to customize the exact behavior of this grid. You can make it look like something completely different. all of the capabilities that are available to you as a developer are still available to you with this environment. It's the only point of RapidApp is providing these options to jump straight to these very high-level concepts. And again, that's just a starting point. Then you can go on to extend and customize and extend and customize. So before we're running a little long, before we run out of time, the other route, besides using the straight Catalyst approach, and again, Catalyst prescribes this specific way of development, the MVC, middle of development, whereas they say you bootstrap an application and then you write your models, views, and controllers, and yada yada, and it's its own application, and has its own directory, and this is the whole approach that the Catalyst people have, which is a good, powerful, deep approach, but it's not the only approach. And so there's other frameworks that have a more casual approach to get to things quicker. Like WebSimple is, I want to just do it quick, right? And Plaque, and then all these things are compatible with Plaque. And so that's the other route. The capabilities that RapidApp exposes in terms of Plaque, it exposes with this other entry point, which is through RapidApp Builder, which with RapidApp Builder, it gives you a instead of bootstrapping an application, you're just simply loading a class, and then you're using standard calls to construct an object and call methods on it. So RapidApp Builder actually is a subclass of Plaque component, so it adheres to that API. So you can expose any RapidApp application, and actually, by the way, Catalyst as well. Catalyst is Plaque compatible also, so you can actually, even without RapidApp, many people don't realize this, but you can expose a Catalyst application in the same manner. It's just RapidApp formalizes that concept with this class structure. And also the other benefit of this approach versus, one of the problems with the Catalyst approach, where you bootstrap an application and then there it is that it is not, you can't subclass it, right? So with this route, with RapidApp Builder, you can subclass it to have a new application based on the earlier one. So like some examples of RapidApp Builder is RapidEFS, for instance, which is the thing that was just released. And oh, and by the way, RapidEFS was awarded by Perltricks.com module of the month for last month. So that was cool. I didn't know, I didn't even know I was in the running for that, but I just saw it on Twitter announcement. This is our module of the month. So it's been popular.
Yeah. Congratulations again. That's really cool.
No, thank you. Thank you. So like, thank you.
What was the prize money for that? What was the prize money for that?
There was no prize money. I'm still waiting for the check for that.
All right.
Maybe it'll show up in the mail. But and you can also, by the way, you can like if you want to like check out RapidEFS, you can just pull it up on MetaCPAN, or also go to rapid.io/fs, and it has a nice little sweet project page and shows you how to use it, and so you can check that out. And there's a link to that from rapidapp.info also. But anyway, that's not the point. The point I'm bringing that up is that it is RapidEFS. It simply extends. If we look at the code for RapidEFS, it extends RapidApp Builder, right? And then it could then in turn be extended. And so this is a different way. This is a different approach to developing an application. So you could, for instance, you could build an application and you could use it. You could extend RapidEFS if you wanted. And it uses the standard Moose conventions. We expose, for instance, we expose mounts, which is RapidEFS operates based on mount points, and it exposes different directory structures in terms of views in a tree, and then it constructs this environment. And what it really then does is it uses the real logic that does that is the file tree class, which is by default this RapidEFS module file tree, which is an example. And again, we don't have time to get into the details of that. But if you look, you can look at the code for that, and there's good documentation as well for this. But let's see, where was the link to that? So this is a RapidApp module, and then once you start getting into the the details of that, this is how you do anything that you want to do. This extends RapidApp module nav tree is a module class that's available, and there's oodles of them that are available, like the grids, and there's data views, and there's all kinds of things that are available. And so then you can, once you've exhausted all of the built-in capabilities, and you want to now go further, and you want to tweak every little thing down to whatever detail, that's when you're going to start writing your own module classes. And part of the reason that I decided to write RapidEFS was to provide an example of doing that was useful, that didn't involve a database. So you can look at the code, and it gets into, there's code in here, but all the code that does all the things that it does is just this one 400-line class, and it ties into the very deep, very robust DSL provided by RapidApp, and you can do all kinds of things. So check out the easy, high-level, low-hanging fruit options, which you can write a ton of applications without ever getting your hands dirty with just the stuff that is just provided right there on a silver platter right now. But you can get your hands dirty also and do whatever you want to do later on. And also, just for comparison purposes, I went ahead and took the Chinook demo, which again, the Chinook demo is on RapidApp .info, and if you want to learn more about the database capabilities and the different config options in that rapid DBIc config, definitely go to RapidApp.info and look at the Chinook demo. But I released a version based on RapidApp Builder on CPAN, and so you can then use that application. Here's an example. You can just load it and then drop it, mount it within the structure of any plaque setup, just like that, or even you can even just call that one line on a command line and fire it up. And if we look at the code behind this, we see we're extending RapidApp Builder, and it's actually really, really simple. The only thing that we're needing to do, because that's all that the Chinook demo is just jumping straight to the automatic capabilities, is we're just saying that we want to use the Rapid DBIc plugin, and then that we want to use this model, and then in this case the config for the config. Let me see, where is it? Did I have a link to it in here? Everything was going fast. Well, it's just I wanted to jump to the model. Oh yeah, there it was. Right, the model again just has a rapid DBIc config, and this is the same thing that we saw earlier, and that's enough to get to all the capabilities, setting these different things. It's just this declarative, and there's stuff I didn't have time to get to, like really powerful virtual columns support. And actually I can just show that really quick, an employee full name, full name right here. This is a virtual column, right? Which is a whole other capability that you can do. Just as an example, right? And these are tied together in the back end. So if I save that, you see that it changed it right there, and that whole capability is enabled just by, where did I go? Just by this definition right here, right there. And you can have basically a subselect, and this is database specific. Any subselect, in this case, this is specific to SQLite. We're just going to concatenate these two columns together, and then we do a set function, and then we split it back out and update it. And that is then what gives you both hooks on the front and the back side to just have it work. And so there it is. That's how when I edited this, I was able, it was able to then, and then I can even edit it on this side, and it'll go back the other way. And so it's full control. And so these sort of capabilities just wrapped around this column concept, where a relationship is a column and a virtual column is a column, and regular columns are columns, but they can have different types of renderers and different types of rules to get to them. That right there opens a huge world of possibilities in application development that you can do just in the structure of using the existing capabilities without, and then again, when you're ready to get further and deeper and you want this to look totally different, not even look like a grid, but still hook into the capabilities, you can extend it and get to that. So that is about all I have. I'll take questions now.
Any questions? You guys have any questions? I think a lot of people are just awestruck with all the capabilities that's built into this. It's really impressive. Martin's got a question here.
Yeah, I think on your website you're saying you've tried this and before you open sourced it with some smaller companies, and it was pretty stable for big databases.
Oh yeah.
How big did you go?
Oh yeah.
You said 10 million. Yeah.
Yeah, we have databases. Yeah, we have databases. 180 applications with 180 tables and 10 million rows. And by the way, that's also why. That's the reason why RapidApp why everything is tied into the back end, and why all the pagination and the sorting and everything goes back to the database, because it's not possible. You can't do that in software. And yeah, it really the limiting factor for how big your database can go is more based on how your database is designed than it is based on RapidApp. And that's sort of part of the point, is that RapidApp is just natively exposes the native capabilities of your database into interfaces, and that's the whole point. So if you have a 10 million row database and you don't set indexes properly, right? And you do other things, you're going to have problems. But then still, sometimes you are going to want to disable. There's certain things, like when you have a million rows in a table, and then each of those million rows have a sub-select for the has many. You're not going to want to try to sort that because it's a brute force operation. So that's why you have capabilities. For instance, you can just you might say, you know what, I'm going to say set that column to sortable 0, right? And you can also then turn off searching and toggle off options, because some of them are just going to be too slow. Just because it's too slow, like with a quick search, like in quick search, I can just type in letters and it will search. And what it does is it does a like. It does a like on all the columns. Well, actually, and you can select which columns you want it to search in, and it'll do a like on those columns. You don't want to do that casually for 10 million rows in a table. So, well, you know what? That's what so you turn that off. Like you turn it off. Like no quick search. You turn that off. You can turn it off in multi-filter, and so that's why it provides you these high-level options to do those things. But it ultimately then comes back to your database and how well you design it. And when you get into multi-million, hundreds of thousands of rows and millions of rows, you need to use strategic indexes and have some idea of what you want, how you want to query that database. And then you do have to tell RapidApp. You tell it, here's what I want you to do. I want you to enable your features for these tables and these columns in this way, but not for others. And it provides those options for you.
Nice. I got a question. So RapidApp has been around for a while, and most of the demos I see are related to like a grid interface to a database.
Right.
Can you describe any other applications you've seen where they've done something different, where it isn't primarily just a grid interface to the database?
Right, absolutely. And in fact, we have a lot of this. And part of the challenge is for us, we have client applications. Like we use RapidApp to develop applications for our clients. And we have, the reason it's very data heavy is because most of our clients are in the manufacturing area. And that's like that 10 million row application, for instance, is a big manufacturing company. And there's only custom views. RapidApp gives you the ability to do arbitrary markup as templates and have those render. You can render for databases, instead of a grid, any arbitrary markup, any arbitrary HTML markup you want, and that can be rich and interactive. I don't have any demos of it because because I can't show you that because it's in these highly sensitive, highly proprietary applications. However, this is why you need to come to YAPC this year, because I am going to be putting together exactly that, some demos of some really customized interfaces just to show that. And that's also sort of part of the challenge. And that's also sort of part of everything is grids, because well, that's the good base, that's the base starting point, and it's one of the most useful structures. But it gives everybody the impression that, well, RapidApp is just grids, it's just databases and grids, right? So, well, you know, to dispel that, I did RapidApp was to say, hey, it's not just databases. And then I'm going to show, you know, at YAPC this year in Salt Lake City, I'm going to show that it's not just grids either.
That's awesome. I look forward to it a lot. That's great.
Other questions? Other questions?
Yeah. Any questions? Anything?
And you can, if you
one other thing one other question I had was, it looks like a lot of your demos are from MySQL, and I know DBIx class does a lot of the heavy lifting with translating between databases. Are there any limitations at all, really, between backends?
It uses the native DBIx class API. So anything that DBIx class supports, RapidApp supports. There are database-specific issues, and so there is, you know, we run into those cases in different times. So like the four databases that have the most support are MySQL, Postgres, SQLite, and MS SQL. Right, but you know, you can also use Oracle and Sybase and, you know, all the different ones that are available. However, there are, you know, different databases have different vendor-specific options and tweaks, and RapidApp understands more of those specific options better on some databases than others. Like for instance, Postgres, it has it understands a great number larger types of columns than MySQL, right? So like in MySQL, there is no Boolean column, right? There's like the way that the typical way that you do a Boolean column in MySQL is you just use a tiny int and you set it to either 0 or 1. Whereas Postgres gives you an actual column that says that it's a bool. Well, so RapidApp reads the database schema, and it will create the editors, like the way that you edit a column, like just as a for instance, let's see, where did a better example? Date, where is sorry. Okay, all right, so for instance, one column type is a date, right? So if I'm going to edit a date, and I go to edit it, RapidApp will present you with a date editor that makes sense with that. And by the way, when you do searches, if I say if I do a search, what was that called? Invoice date. There it is. It knows that it's a date, and so it gives date-specific choices here. Like if you remember the other ones, like if I look at billing city, the choices for that is a string, and so it gives me string-specific things. A date, I get date-specific things. And even beyond that, it understands relative dates. And so you can actually type in a string. I can say -5 days, right? And it will actually translate that into what the equivalent of that would be. Right, and it does, you know, all sorts of cool stuff like that. And I can say -3 years, right, or whatever. So, and that you can just type that in there too. I can just say -3y, and it understands, you know. So this right here, this is a filter. Is show me everything where invoice date is after 3 years ago, and that's applied. So
is that client side, the fuzzy dates? Is that client side?
Yes. So this will move. Yes. So this will move with you. So tomorrow, if I save this view, tomorrow this will look different than it does today. And the next day it will look different still because it's the time the query is executed. And so it moves with you. And so, yeah, so that lets you then, our clients can then author things like, last month's sales, for instance. And it's always correct. You don't have to go in and change it, every, new month. It's always last month's sales. Capabilities like that. But the point to answer the question is it knows to start, it knows to give you these base states based on what it reads from the database. So from Postgres has a bool column type, and it knows that. And I don't think any of my examples have a bool here, but with a bool, RapidApp gives you a checkbox. And I don't remember right now off the top of my head the best place to jump to show you one, but you can imagine it's just the editor is a checkbox, and so RapidApp will automatically do that for Postgres. And then there's other kinds, of column types that are not yet fully supported, and just for those cases, you just either have to you have to customize things yourself. You can choose. It also chooses. It also chooses a renderer. Like this renderer, it's rendering this in a nice format for the date. This is not what it looks like on the database. It's rendering it for you with a renderer. You can change the renderer yourself, and you can change other options. Then there's other things. Then there are still other things that is poorly supported still. So for instance, Postgres also has vector columns and JSON columns, and the longer plan is to automatically support serializing and deserializing a JSON column in an editor, right? Like that's one of the things that we're going to do at some point, and all sorts of other cases and crazy fancy database specific things that are not yet as well supported as other things. Generally, all modern relational databases should work. There may be edge cases. There might be a bug that I haven't found yet relative to Oracle. When we started using Postgres, for instance, a lot more often, I started getting bug reports of, oh, well, this is barfing with this thing, and so I'm sure there's still bugs in RapidApp. And so those things were tweaked and solved. And it's an ongoing process. This has been 6 years and running. We are continuing to massage and improve and grow. But the bottom line is, you can make it do whatever you want for your application. It's just the question really is about how much stuff is already there for the particular platform. And again, the most supported databases, MySQL, SQLite, Postgres, and MS SQL, probably in that order. SQLite and MySQL are probably the most supported. But again, it's improving for everything. Great.
That's awesome to hear. And we're just grateful that you open source and put it on CPAN. That's it's a wonderful tool for us to use, but also just a great example of a modern Perl application that the world can see that that Perl is doing really awesome things still. So thanks so much for taking the time to prepare it for something that the world can use.
Right. Well, I hope that you guys are intrigued now and can think of at least one place where you could say, hey, I could use that, and you want to play with it. A great place to start is you can start with this very slideshow, and here's the link to it. And this is right now this is just a redirect to the GitHub. There's a GitHub repository for this whole slideshow, and you can just run these commands right here and fire up this slideshow. And including all of the and everything. And this will, like you run this line right here, this will install everything you need, including RapidApp and everything else. And you can start right here.
That's wonderful. Yeah, we'll definitely link to that on the Meetup site as soon as this is done. That's fantastic. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I had great fun putting this together. And invite me anytime that you want me to come. I'd love to give another talk for you guys.
Oh, it's fantastic. Yeah, we really appreciate it. Thanks so much for doing all this work to prepare it. And you mentioned before it's a great time to plug that YAPC will be on. Let's see, what are the dates for YAPC? I think the first full week of June, June 7th through the 10th, I believe.
Yeah, and RapidApp Talk on the 9th. It's the first talk on the Tuesday, and it's in the main room. But there'll be plenty of room to get good seats. So help me. I think RapidApp is great, and I think you also agree. And the best way that you can help me if you like RapidApp is get involved, play with it, use it. Come into Pound RapidApp on IRC, ask me questions. I'm there all the time to answer any questions that you have. Submit bug, if you find a bug, you find an issue, send it to me. I'm very responsive in terms of fixing bugs. It's a very, very active project. I'm excited that I'm finally now getting some more participants in the project. It's mainly been me and my employees in my company, IntelliTree is my software development company. Again, we use this for our clients, but I'm trying to build an open source community. So if you want to get involved, please come and get involved, and it'll be worth your while.
Yeah, absolutely. Just for everyone who's listening, he's absolutely right. He's scary responsive to requests. So I don't know how you have the time for all that, but yeah, it's super easy to get a hold of him in IRC. So definitely check him out. So thanks again, Henry. Really, really appreciate it. We look forward to your talk at YAPC, and have a great night. And thanks for staying up late to give this talk.
My pleasure. Thanks, guys.
My pleasure. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thanks. Bye.